The silence in the hallway wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. It was the kind of silence that screams, "Something is wrong." Julian Thorne stood in the doorway of the nursery, his hand trembling as he reached for the light switch. At 7:00 a.m., this room should have been filled with the soft gurgles of his 3-month-old son, Leo. But when the lights flickered on, the crib wasn't just empty, it was stripped bare. No mattress, no blankets, no baby. Julian's heart hammered against his ribs. He had just driven home from a night of passion with his mistress, expecting to sneak back into his perfect life before his wife Elena woke up. Instead, he walked into a nightmare. He didn't know it yet, but the empty crib was just the beginning. His life hadn't just changed, it had been erased, and the person holding the eraser was the one woman he thought was too weak to ever leave him. The drive home from the Four Seasons Hotel had been smooth, almost too smooth. The early morning fog clung to the streets of Seattle, wrapping the city in a grey embrace. Inside his black Mercedes S-Class, Julian Thorne felt invincible. He checked his reflection in the rearview mirror, wiping a faint smudge of lipstick, Sienna's shade Ruby Woo, from his jawline. He was the CEO of Thorne Logistics, a man who moved millions of dollars of freight across the globe daily. He was used to managing risks, and for the last 6 months, managing Sienna while married to Eleanor had been his favorite high-stakes game. Just a late meeting, Elle, he had texted his wife the night before. "Don't wait up. Love you." It was a lie he had told a dozen times. Eleanor never questioned it. She was sweet, compliant Eleanor. Since giving birth to their son Leo 3 months ago, she had been consumed by motherhood, exhausted and perpetually in sweatpants. She wasn't the vibrant woman he had married 5 years ago, and frankly, Julian felt he deserved a break. He deserved Sienna's fire, her adoration, her tight dresses, and expensive taste. He pulled into the driveway of his sprawling, customized estate in Medina. The house was a modern fortress of glass and steel, usually bustling by this hour. The nanny, Mrs. Higgins, usually arrived at 6:45 a.m. Elena was usually in the kitchen, blending kale smoothies that Julian pretended to drink. But today the driveway was empty. Mrs. Higgins' Honda wasn't there. Strange, Julian thought, killing the engine. Maybe she called in sick. He unlocked the massive oak front door and stepped inside. "Eleanor." He called out his voice, practicing the casual, tired tone of a man who had worked all night. "I'm home, babe. Sorry the negotiations ran late." Silence. Not the quiet of a sleeping house, but the hollow, echoing void of an abandoned building. The air felt cold, the thermostat seemingly turned off. He walked into the kitchen. The granite countertops were spotless, too spotless. Usually there were bottles drying on the rack, a half-finished cup of herbal tea mail scattered on the island. Today there was nothing. Not even a crumb. A prickle of unease crawled up Julian's spine. He checked his watch. 7:15 a.m. Elena. He walked toward the stairs, his footsteps echoing too loudly on the hardwood. "Is Leo asleep?" He climbed the stairs, loosening his tie. Maybe she was in the shower. Maybe she had taken the baby for a walk, though it was freezing outside. He pushed open the door to the master bedroom. The bed was made military tight. Julian frowned. Elena never made the bed before 9:00 a.m. She was usually too busy nursing Leo. He walked to the ensuite bathroom. Dry. The towels were folded perfectly. Her toothbrush was missing from the holder, her expensive face creams gone. Panic began to flutter in his chest, a trapped bird beating its wings. He turned and sprinted down the hall to the nursery. This was the room that usually smelled of baby powder and warm milk. He threw the door open. Leo. The crib stood in the center of the room like a skeleton. The mattress was gone. The mobile with the little felt stars that Elena had hand-stitched was gone. The changing table was cleared off. The diaper pail, the rocking chair, the piles of stuffed animals, all gone. "What the hell?" Julian whispered. He ran back to the master bedroom, tearing open the walk-in closet. His side was untouched. His Armani suits, his Italian leather shoes, his collection of watches, all there. He looked at Elena's side. Empty hangers, hundreds of them clattering softly as the draft from the open door hit them. Her designer dresses, her winter coats, her shoes, even the old boxes of photos she kept on the top shelf. Everything was gone. It wasn't a kidnapping. Kidnappers didn't pack suitcases. Kidnappers didn't take the crib mattress. This was an exodus. Julian grabbed his phone, his fingers fumbling as he dialed Elena's number. "The number you have reached is no longer in service. Please check the number and try again." He froze. He dialed again. Same message. He dialed Mrs. Higgins, the nanny. "We're sorry you have reached a number that has been disconnected." "What is going on?" Julian shouted into the empty room. He felt a sudden surge of dizziness. He rushed to the wall, safe, hidden behind the painting of the stormy ocean, a gift from Elena for their first anniversary. He punched in the code 0522, their wedding date. The lock clicked and the heavy door swung open. Julian's knees gave out. He collapsed onto the plush carpet. The stacks of cash he kept for emergencies, roughly 50,000 toiloses, were gone. The Patek Philippe watches he kept as investments gone. But what made his blood run cold wasn't what was missing, but what was left behind. Sitting alone in the center of the metal shelf was a single folded piece of thick cream-colored stationery, and resting on top of the paper was Elena's wedding ring. The 3-carat diamond caught the morning light, mocking him. Julian snatched the note. He recognized Elena's elegant looping handwriting immediately, but the words weren't the sweet, submissive words of the wife he thought he knew. "Julian, I know about Sienna. I've known since August 14th. I know about the apartment you rented for her in Belltown. I know about the diamond bracelet you bought her with the company bonus. I gave you 5 months to stop. I gave you 5 months to look at me, to look at your son and choose us. Last night, when you walked out the door, you made your final choice. Now I've made mine. Don't look for us. You won't find us. And don't worry about the house. I've already spoken to the real estate agent. It goes on the market at noon. You wanted a life without the burden of a family. You have it." Julian crushed the note in his fist. August 14th. That was months ago. That was the week he first took Sienna to dinner. Elena had known the entire time, while she was pregnant, while she was giving birth, while she was smiling at him across the breakfast table. Rage replaced the fear. How dare she? How dare she take his son? He was Julian Thorne. Nobody walked out on him. He scrambled to his feet, his face turning a shade of crimson. "You think you can just vanish?" he growled, grabbing his car keys. "I have more money than God, Elena. I'll find you. And when I do, I'm taking Leo and I'm destroying you." He didn't realize yet that the money he thought he had was already a mirage. He sprinted downstairs, ignoring the silence that seemed to be laughing at him now. He needed to get to the bank. He needed to hire a private investigator. He needed to control the narrative before anyone found out his wife had left him. He jumped back into the Mercedes tires, screeching as he peeled out of the driveway. He reached for his phone again, dialing his personal banker, Marcus. "Marcus, it's Julian. Freeze the joint accounts. Now. She's having a mental breakdown. She took the baby. Freeze everything." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Mr. Thorne?" Marcus's voice sounded tight, professional, and oddly distant. "I'm afraid I can't do that." What do you mean you can't? Julian roared, swerving around a delivery truck. It's my money. Sir, you might want to come into the branch, Marcus said. The joint accounts were closed yesterday afternoon by Mrs. Thorne. She had full signatory power as per the documents you signed last year. Closed. Julian nearly slammed on the brakes in the middle of the highway. There was $4 million in those accounts. Yes, sir. It was transferred via wire to an offshore entity. We verified the signature and the voice authorization. It was all legal. Julian felt the phone slip from his sweaty palm. Legal. And, sir? Marcus added his voice, dropping a decibel. Your personal business credit line. It's been flagged for review. It seems Mrs. Thorne, as the majority shareholder of the holding company, has requested an audit. Julian's car drifted into the breakdown lane as the world stopped spinning. Majority shareholder, Julian whispered. I own the company. Actually, sir, Marcus corrected. When you restructured for tax benefits 3 years ago, you transferred 51% of the controlling stake to the Thorne Family Trust. Mrs. Thorne is the sole trustee. Julian stared out the windshield at the grey sky. He remembered signing those papers. He had been drunk on scotch, laughing with his lawyers about how much tax he was saving. He had handed Elena the pen, telling her, "Just sign here, babe. It's just boring tax stuff." She had signed it. She had looked him in the eye, smiled that shy smile, and signed away his empire to herself. She had been playing the long game, and he had just lost the first round. Julian sat in his car on the shoulder of the I-5 highway, the hazard lights clicking in a rhythmic, mocking tempo. Click-clack. Click-clack. He slammed his fist against the steering wheel, screaming until his throat felt raw. Stupid, stupid. He wasn't screaming at himself. In his mind, this was still Elena's fault. She had tricked him. She was a thief, a kidnapper. He needed to call the police. That was the answer. She took the baby across state lines. That was kidnapping. She took the money. That was theft. He dialed 911. Emergency services. What is your emergency? My wife. Julian gasped, trying to sound like the victim. My wife has abducted our 3-month-old son. She cleared out our house and disappeared. I think she's mentally unstable. I need an Amber Alert issued immediately. So what is your name? Julian Thorne. My son's name is Leo. Okay, Mr. Thorne. Officers are being dispatched to your residence. Please return there and wait for them. Julian spun the car around. He would play the devastated father. He would crush her with the full weight of the law. By the time he got back to the empty mansion, 2 police cruisers were waiting. A tall, stern-looking female officer stepped out. Her badge read, Officer Miller. Mr. Thorne, she asked, her eyes scanning his disheveled appearance, the wrinkled suit from the night before, the lack of a tie, the manic energy. Officer, thank God, Julian said, rushing up the steps. She's gone. She took everything. My son. She took my son. Officer Miller didn't look sympathetic. She pulled out a notepad. Is there a custody agreement in place? Custody. No, we're married. We live together. I came home from work, and she was gone. Sir, unless there is a court order prohibiting her from traveling with the child, it is not kidnapping for a mother to take her child. She stole $4 million. Julian spat. That sounds like a civil matter, sir. Community property. Officer Miller looked at him coolly. You said you were at work. Julian froze. Yes. Overnight negotiations. At the Four Seasons. Miller raised an eyebrow. Julian felt the blood drain from his face. How did you? Mrs. Thorne left a note with the station this morning, along with a welfare check request for you, Miller said, pulling a photocopy from her clipboard. She stated she was leaving the marriage due to infidelity and was relocating for her safety and mental health. She provided proof of safety for the child. She went to the police first, Julian stammered. She covered her bases, Mr. Thorne. Miller said, closing her notebook. She wanted to make sure we knew this wasn't an abduction. We FaceTimed with her and the baby an hour ago. The child is safe-fed and happy. There will be no Amber Alert. Julian stared at the officer. Elena had checkmated him before he even knew the game had started. She had anticipated he would call the cops. She had neutralized his biggest weapon. "So you're going to do nothing?" Julian hissed. "We verified the child is safe. That is our job. If you want to contest custody or finances, you need a lawyer, not a police officer. Good day, Mr. Thorne." As the cruisers rolled away, Julian stood alone in the driveway of his empty kingdom. His phone buzzed. A picture message. It was Sienna. The photo was a selfie of her in lace lingerie, pouting at the camera. The caption read, "Miss you already, Tiger. When are you coming back? I'm bored." Julian stared at the phone. A wave of nausea hit him. Yesterday that photo would have excited him. Today, looking at Sienna's perfectly made-up face, all he could see was the price tag. She was the reason he was standing here. She was the distraction that had allowed Eleanor to dismantle his life brick by brick. He didn't reply. He walked into the house and went straight to his home office. He needed to find the paper trail. Elena was smart, but she wasn't a ghost. There had to be a clue about where she went. He booted up his computer. Access denied. He tried his backup password. Access denied. Damn it! He kicked the desk. He grabbed the landline to call his corporate IT guy, but stopped. If he called IT, they would know he was locked out. Rumors would spread. Thorne Logistics relied on stability. If the board found out the CEO was locked out of his own life and money, the stock would tank. He had to be smarter. He had to think like Elena. Where would she go? Her parents were dead. She had no siblings. Her friends were all his friends' wives, socialites who lunched and shopped. Elena didn't have a support system. That's why he had felt so safe cheating on her. She had nowhere to go. Or so I thought. He started tearing the office apart. He ripped books off the shelves, overturned the wastebasket. Nothing. Then he remembered something. The trash collection was tomorrow. He ran to the garage. The large recycling bins were lined up against the wall. He threw the lid open and started digging. Empty milk cartons, diaper boxes, junk mail. He dug deeper, ignoring the smell of sour milk. Near the bottom, buried under a pile of newspapers, he found it. A travel brochure. It was crumpled and stained with coffee, but he could read the bold letters, "Luxury estates in the Cayman Islands." Julian smoothed it out. The Cayman Islands, non-extradition for financial crimes. No, that was movies. But it was a tax haven, a place for the wealthy to hide. "Got you," he whispered. He rushed back inside and grabbed his cell phone. He dialed the number for a private investigator he had used to do background checks on employees. A man named Vance. "Vance, it's Julian Thorne. I need you to track a flight, private or commercial. Elena Thorne and an infant. Departing Seattle in the last 24 hours. Check flights to the Cayman Islands." "I can do that, Mr. Thorne," Vance's gravelly voice replied. "But my retainer is up front, $5,000. Julian hesitated. His personal accounts were frozen. He checked his wallet. He had the corporate credit card, the black card. "Put it on the Amex," Julian said, reading off the numbers. He held his breath. If Eleanor had frozen the corporate cards, too. "Transaction approved," Vance said. Julian let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. She hadn't frozen the company cards. That was her mistake. She controlled the shares, but he was still the CEO. He still had access to company operational funds. Find her, Vance. I don't care what it costs. As he hung up, a plan formed in his mind. He would fly to the Caymans. He would confront her. He would appeal to her emotions or threaten her with a prolonged legal battle that would drain the stolen money. He would get Leo back. But as the afternoon wore on and the sun began to dip, casting long, sinister shadows across the empty living room, Julian's phone rang again. It wasn't Vance. It was Sienna. "Why are you ignoring me?" she demanded, her voice shrill. "I saw the news." Julian's blood went cold. "What news?" "Turn on the TV, Julian. Channel 5. Julian grabbed the remote. He clicked on the local news. The anchor was looking serious, a graphic behind him, showing the logo of Thorn Logistics. "Breaking news in the business world," the anchor said. "An internal audit at Thorn Logistics has uncovered massive irregularities. Documents leaked anonymously this afternoon suggest that CEO Julian Thorn has been embezzling company funds to support a lavish lifestyle and illicit affairs." The screen changed to show photos, not just photos of spreadsheets, photos of Julian and Sienna, grainy but unmistakable, photos of them kissing at a restaurant, photos of him handing her a jewelry box, photos of them entering the hotel. "The board of directors has called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning to discuss the immediate removal of Mr. Thorn." The anchor continued. The leak reportedly came from a whistleblower within the executive family. Julian dropped the remote. It wasn't just a divorce. It wasn't just a robbery. Elena wasn't hiding in the Caymans. She was destroying him from the inside out. She had leaked the photos. She had triggered the audit. Sienna was screaming on the phone. "My face is on the news." "Julian, they're calling me a home wrecker. You said you were separated. You told me she didn't care." "Shut up," Julian roared. "Shut up, Sienna." "No, you fix this. The reporters are outside my apartment building. I can't leave." "I don't care about your apartment. If you don't fix this..." Sienna's voice dropped, turning venomous. "I'm going to tell them everything. About the bribes you paid to the Port Authority last year. You told me about that when you were drunk, remember?" Julian hung up the phone. He stared at the blank screen. He was fighting a war on 3 fronts now. The police wouldn't help him. His wife was dismantling his company, and his mistress was threatening to send him to prison. And the house was so damn quiet. He needed a drink. He went to the liquor cabinet. Locked. Elena had the key. He smashed the glass panel with his elbow, ignoring the pain and the shards that cut into his expensive suit. He grabbed a bottle of scotch and downed a mouthful straight from the bottle. "You want a war, Elena?" He whispered, his eyes bloodshot. "I'll give you a war." His phone buzzed. A text from Vance. "Mr. Thorn, no flights to Caymans, but I found a private charter manifest. She didn't go south. She went east. She's in Paris." Paris. The city they had honeymooned in. The city where she had told him 5 years ago that she wanted to grow old with him. Julian wiped his mouth. He had the corporate jet. He could be in Paris by tomorrow night. He would find her. He would beg, borrow, or kill to get his life back. But as he packed a bag, he didn't notice the red blinking light of the smoke detector in the hallway. It wasn't a smoke detector. It was a camera. And miles away, on a secure server, Elena was watching him. The Gulfstream G650 climbed through the cloud layer, breaking into the harsh, blinding sunlight of the upper atmosphere. Inside the cabin, the silence was absolute. Julian sat in his usual leather swivel chair, a glass of scotch trembling in his hand. He was alone. He had tried to call Sienna before takeoff to calm her down, but she hadn't answered. He had tried to call his lawyer, but the line went straight to voicemail. The only person who had spoken to him was the pilot, Captain Harrison, who looked at Julian with a strange mixture of pity and hesitation before closing the cockpit door. Julian stared at the tablet in front of him. He had paid for the in-flight Wi-Fi, one of the few things his personal credit card could still handle before hitting its limit. The news cycle was moving faster than the jet. Thorn Logistics shares plummet 15% amid CEO scandal. Who is the mystery Mistress internet? Sleuths identify Sienna Blake. Elena Thorn, the silent genius behind the logistics empire. Julian frowned at the last headline. Genius Elena. She was a housewife. She organized charity galas and picked out curtains. She didn't know the first thing about logistics. He clicked the article. It was from the Wall Street Journal. Sources close to the Thorn family suggest that the proprietary algorithm used by Thorn Logistics to optimize global shipping routes, the very algorithm that made the company billions, was not written by Julian Thorn as claimed in his 2021 memoir. Patent filings unearthed today show the original code was registered under a maiden name, Elena Rostova. Julian dropped the tablet. The scotch splashed onto his trousers. Rostova. That was her name when he met her. She was a quiet data analyst at a rival firm. He had charmed her, swept her off her feet, and eventually she had helped him with some work. He had taken that work, slapped his name on it, and built a kingdom. He thought she had forgotten. He thought she didn't care about credit, only about being Mrs. Thorn. "She's burning the whole world down," Julian whispered. The intercom crackled. "Mr. Thorn, this is Captain Harrison. We're beginning our descent into Le Bourget. However, we have a situation." "What situation?" Julian snapped, pressing the comms button. "Ground control has informed me that upon landing, the aircraft has been impounded. A lien was placed on the jet an hour ago by the Thorn Family Trust." Julian felt the blood roar in his ears. "Impounded? This is a company jet." "Technically, sir, the jet is leased from the trust. The lease has been terminated due to violation of usage terms. I've been ordered to fly the empty bird back to Seattle immediately after you disembark." "You work for me, Harrison." "Actually, sir, my paycheck comes from the trust." "I'm sorry. You'll have to find your own way back." The landing was smooth, but Julian felt like he had crashed. As the stairs lowered onto the wet tarmac of Paris, a cold drizzle greeted him. There was no limousine waiting, no handler, no umbrella holder, just a black town car with a tinted window. Julian walked toward it, assuming it was the service he had hastily booked through an app. But as he reached for the handle, the window rolled down. It wasn't a driver. It was a process server. A small French man with a thick mustache. "Monsieur Thorn." "Yes, just drive," Julian said, throwing his bag in the back. "I am not your driver, monsieur," the man said, handing him a thick envelope sealed in plastic. "I have been hired to serve you papers within the French jurisdiction to ensure international compliance. You are hereby notified of divorce proceedings and a freeze on all European assets." The man smiled politely, rolled up the window, and drove away. Julian stood in the rain, clutching the wet envelope. He looked around. He was at a private airport on the outskirts of Paris, soaking wet with no ride-limited cash, and a wife who seemed to have the eyes of God. He dragged his suitcase toward the taxi stand, his Italian leather shoes squelching in the mud. He needed to get to the hotel. Vance, the PI, had tracked Elena's credit card, one she had seemingly left active on purpose, to the Hotel Plaza Athénée. "You want to play games, Elena?" Julian muttered, shivering. "I'm coming for you." The Hotel Plaza Athénée is one of the most expensive hotels in Paris. It drips with gold leaf red velvet and the scent of old money. Julian stormed into the lobby looking like a drowned rat in his sodden suit. He marched up to the front desk. "I need to know which room Elena Thorne is in." "I'm her husband." The concierge, a man with impeccable posture, looked down his nose at Julian. "Monsieur, we do not give out guest information." "She's here. I know she's here." Julian slammed his hand on the marble counter. "Tell her Julian is here. Tell her I'm not leaving until I see my son." Security guards began to drift closer, their movements subtle but threatening. "Monsieur," the concierge said softly. "Mrs. Thorne checked out 3 hours ago." "Checked out? Where did she go?" "I cannot say. However, she left a message. She said her husband would likely arrive and cause a disturbance." The concierge reached under the desk and produced a small velvet jewelry box. Julian took it, his hands shaking. Had she left him a ring? A peace offering, he opened the box. Inside was a cheap plastic SIM card. "What is this?" Julian asked. "She said your current phone has been compromised," the concierge recited flatly. "She said if you want to speak to her, you must use this. But she also said, she will only speak to you when you understand the value of $1. "I have millions of dollars," Julian shouted, losing control. People in the lobby turned to stare. "Sir, please lower your voice," a security guard stepped in. "Do you have a reservation?" "I want the presidential suite," Julian snarled. He pulled out his black Amex. "Charge it." The concierge took the card. He swiped it. He frowned. He swiped it again. Declined. "Try it again," Julian demanded, sweat mixing with the rain on his forehead. "It's a black card. It has no limit. The terminal says, card reported stolen, lost. Retain card." The concierge looked up, his face hardening. "I'm afraid I have to keep this, monsieur." "You can't keep my card. It is bank policy. Please leave, or I will call the gendarmerie." Julian grabbed the jewelry box with the SIM card and his suitcase. He backed away, seeing the judgment in the eyes of the wealthy guests. He saw a man in a tuxedo, looking at him with the same disdain Julian used to have for people in economy class. He stumbled out onto Avenue Montaigne. It was night now. The Eiffel Tower sparkled in the distance, a beacon of romance that felt like a cruel joke. He checked his pockets. He had €200 in cash. That was it. He needed a phone. He popped his own SIM card out and inserted the one Eleanor had left him. The phone rebooted. Immediately a text message appeared. Unknown number. "Hello, Julian. Welcome to Paris. The game has changed. You have €200. Survive the night. Meet me tomorrow at 10:00 a.m. at the Café de Flore. Don't be late, and don't bring the police, or I disappear forever." Julian stared at the screen. She was toying with him. She wanted him to suffer. He needed a place to sleep. He couldn't afford the plaza. He couldn't even afford a Holiday Inn in this district. He walked for hours, dragging his suitcase, until he found a grimy hostel in the 18th arrondissement. The room smelled of stale smoke and damp walls. He sat on the thin mattress, clutching his knees. His stomach grumbled. He hadn't eaten since the night before. He walked to a corner store and bought a baguette and a bottle of water. He sat on a bench near the Sacré-Cœur, eating the dry bread. His phone buzzed. It was Vance, the PI. He had called the new number. "Mr. Thorne, Vance, did you find where she went?" "I did. But we have a problem." "What?" "The check you wrote me, the retainer. It bounced, Mr. Thorne. Insufficient funds." "I'll pay you," Julian pleaded. "I have assets. I just need time." "I don't work on credit, Julian, especially not for a guy who is trending on Twitter as the broke CEO. I'm pulling the plug." "Wait, Vance, please. Just tell me one thing. Is she alone?" There was a pause. Vance sighed. "No, She's not alone. Julian's heart stopped. Is it a man? Yeah, a man. Tall silver hair. Looks expensive. They looked comfortable, like they were celebrating. The line went dead. Julian dropped the phone on the bench. A man. She had left him for another man. While he was dealing with Sienna, she had been setting up a new life with someone else. Rage, hot and blinding, surged through him. He wasn't just sad anymore. He was dangerous. He would go to the Café de Flore. He would find this man. And he would make them both pay. The next morning, Julian tried to shave in the hostel's cracked mirror with a disposable razor. He cut his chin. A small piece of toilet paper dabbed the blood. His suit was wrinkled. His eyes were shadowed with exhaustion. He looked nothing like the CEO of Thorn Logistics. He looked like a desperate man. He arrived at the Café de Flore at 9:45 a.m. He took a table in the back, nursing a single espresso he could barely afford. At 10:00 a.m. sharp, a black Bentley pulled up. The driver opened the door. Elena stepped out. Julian's breath caught in his throat. She looked magnificent. She wasn't wearing the sweatpants or the stained t-shirts he was used to. She was wearing a tailored crimson trench coat, black stilettos and oversized sunglasses. Her hair was blown out in sleek waves. She looked powerful. She wasn't holding the baby. Panic spiked in Julian. Where was Leo? She didn't enter the cafe alone. A man stepped out of the other side of the car. Vance was right. Tall, silver hair, impeccably dressed. Julian recognized him immediately. It felt like a punch to the gut. It was Jean-Luc Dubois, the CEO of Dubois Global, Julian's fiercest competitor, the man Julian had spent the last 5 years trying to crush. They walked into the cafe laughing. Jean-Luc placed a hand on the small of Elena's back, respectful but familiar. Julian stood up his chair, scraping loudly against the floor. He marched toward their table. Elena. The cafe went quiet. Elena turned slowly, lowering her sunglasses. Her eyes were cold, devoid of the warmth he used to take for granted. Julian, she said, her voice smooth. You look terrible. Where is my son? Julian demanded, gripping the edge of their table. Jean-Luc stood up, blocking Julian's path to Eleanor. Mr. Thorne, I would advise you to step back. You shut up, Dubois, Julian spat. You're sleeping with my wife. Jean-Luc laughed, a rich, genuine laugh. Sleeping with her, Julian, your mind is so small. That is why you are losing. We aren't sleeping together, Julian, Elena said, taking a sip of her cappuccino. We're business partners. Business partners. Julian stared at her. You're a housewife. Elena's expression hardened. She reached into her bag and pulled out a thick folder. She slid it across the table. Open it. Julian opened the folder. It was full of technical schematics, code, logistics models. Recognize these? She asked. These are the designs for the new automated drone delivery system Thorn Logistics is launching next year. Correct, Elena said. The system I designed. The system you told the board you came up with during a vision quest in Joshua Tree. The system you never bothered to copyright because you thought your wife was too stupid to understand intellectual property law. She leaned forward. I sold it, Julian. I sold the patent to Jean-Luc yesterday for $50 million. Julian felt the room spin. You can't do that. That's corporate espionage. No, Jean-Luc interjected smoothly. It is a private sale of intellectual property by the creator, since you never listed it as a company asset to avoid paying taxes on the development costs. It remained her personal property. We checked the paperwork. It is ironclad. You gave my company's future to him, Julian whispered. Your company. Elena raised an eyebrow. It was never your company, Julian. It was my brain and your charisma. But the charisma wore off about the time you started sleeping with a 22-year-old Instagram model. I made a mistake, Julian shouted. One mistake. No, Elena said, her voice dropping to a whisper that cut louder than a scream. You made 1,000 mistakes. You ignored me. You belittled me. You treated me like an accessory. And then you put our son's future at risk by gambling our savings on high-risk stocks. Oh yes, I know about the margin calls, Julian. Julian froze. He hadn't told anyone about the bad trades. I did this to save Leo, Elena said. I liquidated the accounts before the bank could seize them to cover your debts. I sold the tech to Jean-Luc to secure Leo's trust fund. I didn't steal from you, Julian. I salvaged the wreckage you were about to cause. Where is Leo? Julian asked, his voice breaking. He's with a nanny at my new apartment, Elena said. He's safe. Safer than he was with a father who leaves his crib empty to go sleep with a mistress. I want to see him. Not today. Elena stood up. Today you have a meeting. A meeting with who? With the French authorities, Jean-Luc said, checking his watch. You see, Julian, when you entered the country yesterday, you failed to declare the commercial samples you were carrying. I wasn't carrying samples. The laptop, Elena said simply. The one in your bag. It contains encrypted corporate data. Moving that across borders without declaration is a crime under the new trade laws, laws that Jean-Luc lobbied for. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. You set me up, Julian realized. The SIM card. It was a tracker. Everything was a setup, Julian, Elena said, buttoning her coat. From the moment you left the house yesterday morning, I knew you would chase the money. I knew you would chase me. You are so predictable. The cafe doors opened. 2 French police officers walked in. Elena looked at Julian one last time. There was no love left, only pity. Goodbye, Julian. Try not to make a scene. It's bad for the stock price. I still own 51%, remember? She took Jean-Luc's arm, and they walked out the side door as the police marched toward Julian. Julian stood there, the folder of his stolen ideas in his hand, watching his wife walk away into a life he could never touch again. The officer grabbed his shoulder. Monsieur Thorne, you must come with us. Julian looked at the officer, then at the empty cup of coffee he couldn't pay for. Okay, he whispered. I'm ready. The holding cell in the Palais de Justice was nothing like the suites Julian was used to. It smelled of bleach and unwashed bodies. The fluorescent light buzzed incessantly, a mosquito in his ear that wouldn't let him think. Julian sat on the concrete bench, his head in his hands. He had been there for 48 hours. No phone, no lawyer, no contact with the outside world, just the replay of Eleanor's cold stare in the cafe over and over again. It was never your company, Julian. The door clanked open. A guard grunted something in French and stepped aside. A woman walked in. She was sharp, dressed in a charcoal suit that cost more than Julian's first car. She carried a leather briefcase and an air of absolute boredom. Mr. Thorne, she said, her accent American, but clipped. I am Evelyn Vance. I represent the Thorne Family Trust. Julian scrambled up. You work for the trust. You work for Elena. Get me out of here. This is a misunderstanding. I didn't steal anything. Evelyn didn't sit. She placed her briefcase on the metal table and clicked the latches open. The French authorities disagree, she said, pulling out a stack of documents. You were found in possession of a hard drive containing proprietary source code valued at $50 million. Code that had just been sold to Dubois Global. To them it looks like industrial espionage. Attempted theft. It's my laptop, Julian screamed. which belongs to the company, Evelyn corrected. And since you are no longer the CEO, the board voted unanimously to remove you this morning. You have no right to possess it. Julian slumped back against the wall. Fired, they fired me. Conduct unbecoming. Embezzlement. And of course the public PR nightmare. You are toxic, Julian. No one wants to touch you. She slid a document across the table. However, Evelyn continued, Mrs. Thorne is merciful. Julian looked at the paper. Plea agreement and dissolution of marriage. What is this? A lifeline, Evelyn said. Here are the terms. You plead guilty to a lesser charge of mishandling corporate data. You accept immediate deportation back to the United States. You sign these divorce papers granting full sole custody of Leo to Eleanor. You waive all rights to alimony the house and the company shares. You want me to give up everything? Julian laughed, a dry, hysterical sound. I won't sign. I'll fight it. I'll get a real lawyer. Evelyn pulled out a tablet. You have no money for a lawyer, Julian. Your personal accounts are overdrawn by $400,000 thanks to your margin calls. But if you want to fight, you should see this first. She tapped the screen. A video started playing. It was an interview on a gossip news channel. The headline read, Mistress tells all how Julian Thorne promised me the world. There was Sienna. She was crying fake tears, Julian knew, but effective. He told me his wife was abusive. Sienna sobbed on camera. He told me he was scared for his life. I didn't know he was stealing money. I was a victim too. He used me. Julian stared at the screen. She's lying. I paid for her apartment. I bought her a car. She's cooperating with the FBI, Evelyn said, turning the tablet off. She gave them your text messages, the ones where you discussed hiding assets. She's turning state's witness to avoid jail time for receiving stolen funds. You are alone, Julian. Evelyn tapped the document on the table. If you sign this, Elena drops the civil suits. You avoid French prison. You go home. You start over. And if I don't, then you stay here. The sentence for industrial espionage is 5 to 10 years in a French prison, and when you get out, you'll still be broke and you'll still be divorced. It's your choice. Julian looked at the pen. He thought of Leo, his son. He would never see him walk. He would never teach him to throw a ball. Does she hate me that much? Julian whispered. She doesn't hate you, Mr. Thorne. Evelyn said, her voice devoid of sympathy. She just doesn't need you anymore. You were a bad investment. She's cutting her losses. Julian's hand shook as he picked up the pen. He felt like he was signing his own death warrant. In a way he was. He was signing away the man he used to be, the CAO, the husband, the father. He scribbled his signature. Evelyn snatched the papers away before the ink was even dry. Smart choice, she said, packing up. The guards will escort you to the airport in 2 hours. Do not try to contact Eleanor. Do not try to come to the house. A restraining order is already in effect. She walked to the door. Wait, Julian called out. Tell her I'm sorry. Evelyn paused, looking back with a faint smirk. I'm paid to handle legal matters, Mr. Thorne. Not delivery messages to the ex-wife. Goodbye. The door slammed shut. Julian was left alone, in the silence, the weight of his smart choice crushing him into the floor. 5 years later, the rain in Seattle was relentless. It wasn't the romantic mist that Julian used to watch from his heated office in the skyline. It was a cold, soaking downpour that got into your bones. Julian adjusted the collar of his reflective vest. It was 4:00 a.m. His shift at the distribution center was just ending. He looked older than his 42 years. His hair was thinning and grey at the temples. His face was lined with the kind of exhaustion that sleep couldn't fix. He didn't wear Italian suits anymore. He wore steel-toed boots and work pants bought from Walmart. "Hey, Thorne," the shift manager, a kid barely out of his 20s named Kyle, yelled. "You missed a pallet in Section D. Clean it up before you punch out." "Sure, Kyle," Julian muttered, keeping his head down. He walked back to the forklift. The irony wasn't lost on him. He spent his days moving boxes for a logistics company, a competitor to the one he used to own. He was the lowest rung on a ladder he used to sit on top of. He lived in a studio apartment in a rough part of Tacoma. He took the bus to work. His wages were garnished to pay off the IRS debts that had lingered after the divorce. He had no friends. The socialites he used to party with had treated him like a leper the moment his bank account hit zero. He finished the job and walked out into the rain. He had a long wait for the bus. As he stood at the stop, a massive billboard across the street caught his eye. It was brightly lit, cutting through the gloom. It was an advertisement for Thorne Dubois Logistics, the future of global shipping. And there she was, Elena. She was on the billboard, standing next to Jean-Luc. She looked radiant, powerful, and happy. She was wearing a white power suit, her hand resting confidently on a globe. The tagline read, "Leadership you can trust." Julian stared at it, the water dripping off his nose. She had kept his name. Not out of respect, but because it was a brand. She had taken his name and made it mean something better than he ever could. A sleek black SUV splashed through a puddle nearby, slowing down as it approached the traffic light. Julian glanced at it. His heart stopped. He knew that car. He didn't know the license plate, but he knew the silhouette. The rear window was rolled down halfway. Inside, a boy was laughing, a boy with dark curly hair and bright eyes. Leo. He was 5 years old now. Julian stepped off the curb, ignoring the red hand on the crosswalk signal. "Leo," he whispered. The boy looked out the window. He saw a man in a dirty reflective vest, soaked in rain, looking at him with desperate eyes. Leo stopped laughing. He looked confused. He turned to the woman sitting next to him. Elena leaned forward. For a second, their eyes met through the rain and the tinted glass. Julian took a step forward, raising his hand. "Elena, it's me, it's Julian." Elena didn't flinch. She didn't look angry. She didn't look sad. She looked at him with the same polite disinterest one would give a stray dog on the side of the road. She said something to the driver. The light turned green. The SUV accelerated smoothly, leaving Julian standing in the middle of the street, surrounded by exhaust fumes and dirty water. "Wait!" Julian choked out, but his voice was drowned by the sound of the city. He watched the taillights fade into the distance. "Mister, you gonna move?" Julian turned. A teenager was waiting to cross the street, looking at him like he was crazy. "Yeah," Julian whispered. "I'm moving." He walked back to the bus stop and sat on the cold metal bench. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his lunch, a sandwich wrapped in foil. He took a bite. It tasted like ash. He realized then that the punishment wasn't the poverty. It wasn't the bad job or the small apartment. The punishment was knowing that they were happy. They were thriving. And they hadn't just moved on, they had erased him. To Leo, he wasn't a father. He was just a stranger in the rain. Julian looked up at the billboard one last time. Elena smiled down at him, frozen in time, untouchable. He lowered his head and wept, the sound lost in the relentless cleansing rain. Julian Thorne thought he was the king of his world. He thought his wife was weak, his mistress was loyal, and his money was eternal. But he learned the hardest lesson of all: you don't truly know someone until you betray them. Elena didn't just leave him. She outplayed him. She showed him that the person holding the family together is often the one with the most power, even if they never show it. Julian spent the rest of his life chasing the ghost of the happiness he threw away for a cheap thrill. He had everything, and he traded it for nothing. What do you think? Did Julian deserve his fate, or was Eleanor too harsh in her revenge? Let me know in the comments below. Type Team Eleanor if you think she was a genius, or Team Mercy if you think she went too far. If you enjoyed this story of karma and justice, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Turn on that notification bell so you never miss a story. We have a new drama coming out next week that you won't believe. Thanks for watching.